It's the SNL Hall of Fame podcast with your host, Jamie Dew, Chief Librarian Thomas Senna, and featuring Matt Ardill. And now, curator of the hall, Jamie Dew.
All right, thank you so much, Doug DeNance. It is a thrill to be here with you, as it is every week. My name is Jay Dee, and I am the host and curator of the SNL Hall of Fame. I'm also the only person, it seems, that gives a good goddamn if anyone walks in here with clean feet. So if you do me a favor and wipe them off before you come in, that would be large. The SNL Hall of Fame podcast is a weekly affair, and each week we take a deep dive into the career of a former cast member, host, musical guest, or writer, and add them to the ballot for your consideration. Once the nominees have been announced, we turn to you, the listener, to vote for the most deserving and help determine who will be enshrined for perpetuity in the hall. We've done this 3 times already. This is season 4, and we're about to do it all again. This is our 4th episode of season 4. We have already nominated Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and Fred Armisen. This week we are dipping down into the cast member column once again and calling on our friend from the SNN, the Saturday Night Network, Superfan Brigade. Sammy K will be joining us to discuss Vanessa Bayer. So this should be a great episode. I'm looking real forward to hearing what Thomas and Sammy get up to in their conversation. But for now, I should head on over to Matt's Minutia Corner, and I think I'll do just that. Okay, I'm walking down the hall here. It's bustling. There's lots of people checking out all the exhibits. There's somebody looking at the Conehead exhibit right now. That's really cool. And just down here past the way is a corner that we like to call Matt's Minutia Minute Corner. And there he is himself in the flesh. Hey. Matt, what's going on, my brother?
Not much. And how about you, Jamie?
Just walking around the hall, checking it out.
Yeah, I really like the new Coneheads exhibit. It's terrific.
Yeah, it's right. It's righteous, right? Yeah.
Great. Well, today I've got a treat. More recent cast member, Vanessa Bayer.
Oh, this is going to be great.
Yeah. So Vanessa's 5'6". She was born November 14th, 1981 in Cleveland. Her brother, is a music journalist and punk guitarist, Jonah Bayer. She found her love of comedy while battling She found her love of comedy at age 15, battling lymphoblastic leukemia, so it helped her get through it. She has said of the experience, I don't know if it made me funnier, but it was so amazing how it made everything okay, which she then mined for her recent television show, I Love You for That. She then mined that for her new television show, I Love That For You, playing a home shopping network host who also overcame childhood leukemia, but on the verge of getting fired, pretended it came back to keep her job. So it's like, that's a dark twist. That is a dark twist.
Very dark twist.
It just is, that she has that bright, shiny smile, and behind that, there's the mind of a very dark comedian, and I love it. Now, she was a Make-A-Wish kid and got a trip to Hawaii with her family. As a form of gratitude, in 2015, she hosted the Evening of Wishes. It's a dinner raising money for the foundation. And then in 2019, she wrote a book, How Do You Care for a Very Sick Bear? It's a children's book talking about how to help a friend with a long-term illness. To give kids the tools they need to help their friends.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's such a great way to sort of pay it forward, being a survivor of early illness. Now, she attended the Annenberg School for Communication at the University of Pennsylvania. During that time, she interned on Sesame Street and Late Night with Conan O'Brien, appearing on several bits. So she's one of the many SNL alumnus. She's an SNL alumni who graduated from the intern pool. And she was actually on several sketches for Conan. My favorite being the one where she plays Andy's sister with a crush on Conan.
I haven't
Constantly weirded out and very intense. Now she at that time was also a member of the all-woman musical sketch troupe Bloomers. She has 50 IMDb credits and 3 as an actor, 3 as a writer. My favorite post SNL role being her as the emotional vampire Evie on What We Do in the Shadows. Literally perfect casting. Her and Colin Robinson playing off of each other, a delight. When preparing for the show, I Love You for That, when preparing for the show, I Love That For You, she bought the executives at Showtime blankets from the Casa Zeta Jones line of home goods sold on the channel. So she watched a lot of Home Shopping Network. Big fan of the Salt Lake City Real Housewives, and hosts a podcast, How Did We Get Weird, with her brother Jonah.
That's very cool. Very cool. Have you listened to that podcast?
I haven't. I just found out recently, so I'm going to check it out. It looks like a really cool concept. Like her and Seth both have podcasts with their siblings.
Yeah. So does Heidi Gardner.
Oh, geez. Well, I'm gonna have to
Heidi Gardner, or she did anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. I have to check all 3 of them out then.
Well, you've got some work to do.
I do.
I'll leave you to it.
Thank you. Downloading that now.
All right, Matt and Jamie. Yes, thank you so much. And we are talking about this is an episode, actually, I'll say this, that's going to be very near and dear to me. So when Jamie and I talked about season 4 back in the spring, and we decided to have a draft to determine the nominees, I told Jamie that Vanessa Bayer would 100% be the topic of an episode because she's one of my all-time favorite cast members and she deserves it. And I told Jamie, I said, if we do this draft, Vanessa Bayer is probably going to be my first pick. So she was my first pick. Here we are. I'm so excited about this episode. And I wanted to introduce our guest to join me in celebrating Vanessa. He's back for his second SNL Hall of Fame appearance. He was our guest in season 3 for the Rihanna episode. He did such a good job that we just had to bring him back. Sammy K from the Saturday Night Network. Sammy, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Thomas, it's really great to be here. Actually, I hate to correct you for my 3rd appearance because I was also on the Seth Meyers episode. So, I was able to talk about a writer, my first appearance, and a musical guest. And now I get to talk about just a really special cast member. And I'm just excited to dive into Vanessa Bayer and her career and all her contributions to SNL over the years.
Before we get into our Adore Fest, Sammy, with Vanessa, and by the way, thank you so much. 3rd timer, Sammy K here. Before we start fawning over Vanessa Bayer, Sammy, we're going to do plugs at the top. We're a little different on this podcast. We let the guest sometimes do plugs at the top. So tell us about anything you've recently done on the Saturday Night Network. If there's anything we can look forward to, anything you're especially proud of in the archives.
Absolutely. Well, during the summer season, we typically on the Superfan Takeover, which is kind of the show that I get the host on the network, where we, me and a couple other, pretty prominent SNL fans in the community get together to, talk about some of our favorite sketches from the history of the show. We've done a lot of drafts in the past. So, during the summer, we do drafts. We've drafted, our ideal episode where we pick like a monologue and a sketch and things like that. We've drafted hosts before. So, those are probably the episodes that I love the most. They're the most time consuming. They can end up being 2 or 3 hours, but those are ones that you haven't had the chance to check out. I would definitely recommend.
It's fun to see the super fans' preferences and how they value things and everything like that. And you guys do a great job over there. And in our network of SNL fans that we tend to interact with online and on our podcasts, I might consider myself the biggest Vanessa Bear fan, but I think you're close, Sammy, because I've heard you praise her multiple times on different podcasts. So I had to have you on for this episode. I think the world needs a dedicated podcast episode to celebrate Vanessa Bear's time on SNL. What do you think?
Well, I was definitely honored to be asked to be on this because, yeah, like you said, it's good to hear that you're also a huge fan. I mean, it's no surprise because she's just so great. But she's somebody who, when she joined the show, it was just kind of early on in my SNL watching career. I always kind of say that when I started watching the show in like 2007, 2008, the first cast member that I really got to see come into the show and kind of progress and then eventually leave and I had to say goodbye to was Bobby Moynihan in 2008. But very similarly, we have in 2010, we have Vanessa Bayer come in with such a strong class, Taron Killam, Jay Farrow, and Paul Britton, who I think is also super underrated. And seeing her kind of enter this kind of established cast that I was watching at the time, I was like, who's this new face? And I feel like I instantly just clicked with her humor, kind of fell in love with her persona on SNL and all the amazing characters she brought to the stage.
Yeah, Vanessa's in that interesting position as an SNL cast member of being widely respected, I think. You almost see nothing negative said about her work on the show, but she also went about her time at SNL a bit under the radar. So she joined the cast. You'd mentioned like her contemporaries, but when she joined the cast, she had established people in the cast like Kristen Wiig, Sudeikis, Bill Hader, Andy Samberg, Fred Armisen, Kenan Thompson, still here at SNL today. He was already an established member of the cast when Vanessa joined. So just a who's who of cast members that Vanessa had to fit in with. So I'm kind of curious to kick things off. Like, what are qualities about Vanessa that made her get positive attention, even though she was in the cast with a bunch of heavy hitters?
Well, I think that is, the question itself about how she was in this cast of heavy hitters. I mean, I think, and, granted, we're talking about shows and sketches I watched 13 years ago at this point, back in 2010, but it really felt like just from the jump, she kind of just fit right in. Like, and kind of echoing, Bobby Moynihan, as I said before, like these two people had such a challenge of entering this group of, like you said, heavy hitters, this established kind of connection they all had. And I think she was able to just fit right in, find her niche, and, was able to blend in with the rest of the cast. And, not only is that a quality that I think is something I see to be, very positive that, I look at, but also she just brings such a level of sincerity to all of her characters. I find that a lot of her characters have this sort of childlike innocence to them, but then she's able to really juxtapose it with like, whether it's like a raunchy joke or setting, that I think that is like the recipe that you have for like a great Vanessa Bayer character. And I'm sure that the ones we bring up today are going to kind of fit that mold, but they never felt like, oh, I've seen this exact flavor from Vanessa Bayer before. She kind of had that theme running through a lot of her sketches and characters, but was able to find a new angle, which is why, I think she truly is one of the greats.
Yeah, exactly. She had like what I always notice about her was that she had this a lot of times positive, upbeat delivery, but that would make some of the more, I guess, like raunchy or dark or whatever, when she had that kind of turn in character, that would make it that much more effective. Because Vanessa, you kind of picture her smiling and just a little more upbeat, but it made the other aspects that she was great at a lot more effective. So that was very well put, Sammy. So what's a sketch or character that immediately comes to mind when you think of Vanessa's work on SNL?
Well, I know we're not going to necessarily do this conversation in chronological order, but I do think a great place to start would be the Miley Cyrus show.
So, Katie Holmes, you played Batman's girlfriend in the first ever Batman movie in 2005. Which is pretty cool, because I just auditioned to play his girlfriend in the next Batman movie. So, do you want to see my screen test?
Sure, okay.
Okay, let's roll that clip.
We need to get out of here. This whole place is gonna blow.
Oh my God. This is so scary and suspenseful and stuff like that. And I'm in like all this danger and stuff like that. And you're like Batman, so you're kind of like a bat and you're kind of like a hot guy. So it's like really sexy and it's really scary and it's really suspenseful and I might die.
Pretty sure it was the Bryan Cranston episode from her first season. It might have been, I don't think it was her first episode, but it was either the second or third episode that she was on the cast. Her second episode, she kind of is the star of her own sketch. And, you know, obviously in modern day SNL, like when that happens, we kind of be, you know, you automatically kind of be like, oh, who's that? Like, this is huge, especially when you have a cast that's 12, 13, 14 people to be able to get that showcase. And clearly she came to the, you know, the writer's night that week with just such a great concept. And, you know, the impression itself, I think on a past Superfan takeover, we had like an favorite celebrity impression based episode. And I think she was one of my picks because I was a Disney Channel kid and I grew up in this era with the Miley Cyruses and, you know, the Dylan Cole Sprouses and Selena Gomez. So kind of being able to, as a teenager, see that kind of transition from something that I watched as a kid to something I'm now watching as kind of like a teenager on SNL. Seeing those worlds collide was always super fun to me when I first started getting into the show. And the impression is it's just so good. Like, she was able to take somebody who obviously was a huge star, but she was able to kind of find the things that made her, you know, Miley Cyrus. Like, you know, the nasally voice, everything about it, the like we were saying earlier, the childlike energy. It was just great. And not only was she able to bring such a strong impression to the show in her second episode, but she created like a whole world around it. It wasn't just like her being on, you know, Celebrity Jeopardy or Celebrity Family Feud where she has like one or two lines here and there. And it's like, okay, that's a good impression. She kind of built this whole character and, you know, was able to be the star of her own sketch. And I think that's super impressive.
Yeah, I think as SNL fans, we watch and we see impressions all the time. So we kind of become numb to impressions. And I think a lot of us look for impressions that not only look and sound kind of like the person, but it has to have an angle behind it. And I think Vanessa found an angle behind it. She did have that inflection, the froggy kind of voice or nasally voice, but she found the angle, the almost aw shucks, the world kind of revolves around me, oblivious to certain things. Though Billy Ray Cyrus worships her. First played by Bryan Cranston. Yeah, that was like the first sketch. Bryan Cranston played Billy Ray Cyrus in that. But Vanessa definitely tapped into an angle for that impression. That's why I'm sure she did it so many times, is they saw that this wasn't just a throwaway Miley Cyrus, like you mentioned, that you could put it on Celebrity Jeopardy or something like that, and then we'll never see it again. She came into the show with this, I think, in her back pocket. And you could tell. And on the Saturday Night Network, they just did an impression countdown. And I was lucky enough to be on the final three. But I was pleasantly surprised that this Miley Cyrus impression finished number 5 on that impression countdown. It was the highest ranked. Yeah, it was the highest ranked non-political impression on the countdown. That speaks so much to
that's huge.
That's huge. Like, it's just beloved. It was even more beloved, Sammy, than I thought.
Yeah. When I brought that to the Superfan Takeover episode I did, I was like, you know, not sure if people were going to be, you know, feeling the same way, but I do truly think it is one of the great celebrity impressions on SNL. And I think Vanessa Bayer was just able to kind of capture like the right moment to do this character or, you know, to impersonate this celebrity. The only thing I wish we would have been able to see, I mean, obviously we got to see when Miley was host, you know, do the classic SNL trope of, you know, now we bring the real person on, except, you know, this time there's a little bit of a twist. She's playing Justin Bieber, which was very fun, but would have been nice to see her bring this back when, you know, Miley kind of took that era around like 2013, you know, the Bangers era where, you know, she had, you know, this whole new look and everything. That would have been a cool thing to see, but it feels like they maybe decided, you know, we did this a couple times and, you know, let's not, you know, run into the ground, which, you know, I guess you can respect as well.
Yeah, you're right, though. It would have been fun to see. Maybe when Miley was kind of getting a little more wild over the years, it would have been funny to see where Vanessa could have taken that. But I think this is a good example of something that I've always thought about Vanessa. And I said it at the top of the show. It's like, I think when people talk about all-time great cast members, they don't automatically, I think people just don't think about Vanessa. But then when they start actually crunching their brains or they're reminded of stuff that she's done, they're like, oh yeah, I love that. Oh, I love that too. I love that too. So she's one of those ones that slips through the cracks. And then people start really thinking about it. And it's like, okay, wow, she does have like this resume that's pretty awesome. I think another example of that is something that she did in her first season as well. It debuted in a sketch, but people know it better for Weekend Update, was Jacob, the bar mitzvah boy. So Sammy, how did you feel about Jacob? I know I love Jacob.
Well, I love Jacob because, if people at home can't tell from my podcast appearances, I'm Jewish. I had a bar mitzvah. Actually, I've maybe mentioned this on other podcasts, but my bar mitzvah theme night live. So, I was, a big SNL fan even back then. And, I was also a counselor at Jewish summer camp. So I have met so many Jacob the bar mitzvah boys over the years. And she was able to, again, capture this kind of childlike innocence in her portrayal here as Jacob. I love the interactions she would have at the Weekend Update desk with Seth Meyers. This is something that we kind of talked about on our Seth Meyers episode, where half the fun of these appearances during Seth's era on the show is the dynamic and the interaction between the character and Seth. Like, Seth wants to see Jacob the bar mitzvah boy, be able to succeed. And, he is just a nervous little kid. And she portrays that so well. And it's so funny. The dare is great. And, this is a classic.
Shabbat is the traditional day of rest, lasting from sundown Friday to sundown Saturday. I mean, I've heard of recess, but this is ridiculous.
The cadence of the way Jacob speaks is great. Just like a kid on autopilot reading a rehearsed speech. I don't know if you've seen in your day that type of kid who's just like has this thing that they rehearsed and damn it, they're going to do it. And if you try to interrupt them, they're just going to kind of like ignore you and keep doing what they're doing. And that's like the timid. She played timid so well with Jacob. Like you're absolutely right. The way like she played off of Seth and Cecily and Michael Che, like we got to see Jacob play off of multiple people too. And it was the same way. Like they would try to interrupt Jacob and Jacob would just kind of look and then go back into his rehearsed speech. And that was just like all Vanessa, man. Like, and then the dumb jokes about his brother, homework, the Yankees.
On the 3rd through 6th days, God created many more things, such as the sun, the moon, the fish and the birds, land animals, and finally, humans, which may or may not include my brother Ethan.
The use of her facial expression to just to get a laugh, but like when she makes a dumb joke as Jacob and then like has that look, just like this was such a fully formed, like perfect.
Yeah. And one
character.
thing I'd like to add to this, which I think might be a bit of an underrated moment, because I know she brought this character in a couple of times, multiple Weekend Update eras, because I think Che and Jost were around for a couple of these as well. But when Cecily Strong was briefly an anchor at the Update desk, it must have been one of her first shows, or maybe her first show. Jacob makes an appearance, and Cecily kind of chimes in, and the Jacob character is just like very nervous, making all these faces, like doesn't interact with Cecily at all, and it's just like such a great like moment. Like they're able to kind of find new ways to build onto this, awkward, nervous, nebbish kind of character, and this is just really great.
Yeah, because what do you think is the thing that would make a boy like Jacob the most nervous?
Talking to Cecily Strong.
Is a pretty girl talking to him. Exactly. So that was like perfectly well played. Of course, Jacob's not going to say anything to Cecily Strong. That was just so wonderful. The Yankees yarmulke is like iconic to me, with on top of the curly hair. That's just such a perfect look to this character too. Like when I think of Update characters, this is how they should be. Like Jacob was formulaic, but that's fine. Like I think that's how most Update characters are, but it's just fun to see how they're going to fill in those beats and how they're going to play off of the Update anchor. And Vanessa is just so good at that. Like, she understands the timing, she understands the beats, she understands what's funny about this character just so perfectly. And I think people, when you remind them of Jacob, it's another one of those where they go, oh yeah, Jacob, I love that.
And another thing to add to this is, she's taking something from her background. Obviously she wasn't a bar mitzvah boy, but she was a bat mitzvah girl. So she's able to kind of, incorporate that element of her history into a character that plays for an audience that is a majority not from that culture, and it still plays. So that is just kind of a testament to her ability as a performer and as a writer to make it specific to her, but still be able to find something that appeals and makes people can relate to. Everyone can relate to. You either were an awkward boy, or you knew an awkward boy, or you're an awkward girl, or whatever. So it's very special for me personally. Like I said, as someone who's Jewish, that she was able to make this such a big popular character.
Yeah, and as someone who's not Jewish, I completely related to Jacob all the same. So that's like, that's like you tapped into something really special there. So Sammy, where should we go from here as far as Vanessa's work on SNL? What else should people know?
Well,
about?
I think we've waited long enough to bring up this trilogy of classic commercial parodies, the Totino's pizza roll sketches. Rewatching these today in preparation for this podcast, it was amazing how they were able to take this concept. The first time, it's kind of, it's not even really centered around her character. She's kind of like a vessel for, I think it was like a Super Bowl fun pack, to where, they're advertising when, your hungry guys are watching the game, you can be playing with all these like little kids' toys, while like, they're watching the serious game. So that is the bit in like the first sketch, the kind of, everything surrounding, the actual Vanessa character is something that they kind of, more so developed in the sequel sketches. And they just...
Yeah, with this activity pack one, though, I just noticed with her, first of all, wonderful delivery as far as the stereotypical wife in those commercials.
Who's ready for some more Totino's pizza rolls?
Oh, man. Thanks, honey. You're the best.
Anything for my hungry guys.
Like, she has that cadence and that delivery down, but her excitement, and you had mentioned like a childlike innocence in a lot of what she does, and her excitement as that character while doing those children's activities was like perfectly Vanessa. Like, it's not a hassle necessarily. It's even, at the beginning of the commercial anyway, it's not a hassle for her. She's excited to be doing those activities and keeping herself busy while her hungry guys are watching the Super Bowl. By the end, she's like a little frustrated, but trying to keep her smile and keep it together. And that's just so Vanessa to me too. Like, you can tell there's frustration and almost pent up rage there, but she's trying to like play it off and smile and say, okay. So I think there was a lot to this activity pack one, and like a good baseline. You mentioned obviously this is a trilogy, but this one was a good baseline for what we're going to see.
No, absolutely. And this is also just to think about, the hosts that are in all of these sketches are so great as well. Like, J.K. Simmons, I can see that this is something that was pitched for J.K. Simmons. Like, it totally makes sense. But then in the later sketches, you bring in, a Larry David and a Kristen Stewart, and, the whole world of this sketch changes. I think a conversation in the SNL community a lot is when you bring back a recurring sketch, how do you iterate on it? How do you take a character and either put them in a new circumstance or build upon it instead of just rehashing it? I feel like this is something from last season on SNL with the Lisa from Temecula stuff that I think a lot of people in the community were kind of frustrated with. But this is like the blueprint for how you do a recurring sketch, in my opinion. And it doesn't always have to be something where it takes, a crazy dark turn, but it definitely helps that in the second sketch, the dark turn that it takes is amazing. Like, the kind of horror-esque tropes that they're able to incorporate into the sketch are amazing. Vanessa is kind of doing the same spiel that she does in the first sketch about the Totino's pizza rolls, but she keeps getting interrupted by, the people watching the game being like, go, 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 oh, touchdown.
Why not treat your hungry guys to the delicious taste of Totino?
And she gives these like little vocal inflections to where she's still that like very positive mom character, but like, you're starting to see the cracks kind of form. And the escalation in that, how it really turns into like a horror movie is just so fun.
Yeah, this was great emotional acting by Vanessa. Like we're seeing her range. She's a really good actor, honestly. Like I've noticed just rewatching a lot of her sketches, I think she could act, and we see like some good range on her. The way she pivots out of character just so beautifully when she sees that there's nothing on the TV, that the guys aren't watching anything, and they're still chanting like "Go, go, go, touchdown."
Okay, haha. Very funny, Steven. Now cut it out.
Go, 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 go! Touchdown!
Why are you doing this? Brittany, get in the car.
No, 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 no. Oh, fumble.
What's happening to my hungry guys?
That was a nice pivot or turn from what was established with that character. So I think, the second installment of this Totino's trilogy, 2 for 2, in my opinion here. And Sammy, I think, in my opinion, this third one that we're about to talk about is the masterpiece of this series.
I totally agree with you. And we talk a lot about sketches that I feel like kind of permeate the culture in some way. Like, I'm not saying that this is like the biggest cultural moment that SNL's ever had, but this is something that when this came out and to this day, I think people still talk about like this sketch. And I think this was something that kind of entered the mainstream. The idea to bring Kristen Stewart in, who at this time was starting to do a lot more, kind of artsy, independent movies. She'd probably done, movies with like a French director and things like that, to kind of incorporate sort of the French kind of romance love story angle to it was just like so genius. Being able to have somebody with like kind of the sex appeal of Kristen Stewart and juxtapose it with, the mom character that Vanessa Bayer plays in these Totino sketches is just next level from a writing perspective. Such a great decision to do. And I just love how you have like these kind of two scenes going back and forth, similar to the other Totino sketches where you have the guys watching the game and you have what Vanessa Bayer is doing, but they're in like totally different worlds. Like she is in like some sort of French romantic film. The things that they kind of come up with to bring in the Totinos in. She's drawing Kristen Stewart and she has like a Totinos in their mouth. She brings the cigarette in. And I think, Thomas, I don't know if you can think of a better line in these sketches than when Kristen Stewart asks, so what's your name? And Vanessa Bayer is just like,
I've never had one.
Absolutely genius stuff.
That's perfect. Absolutely perfect. And the way they start building Vanessa's character here, and the way Vanessa starts building her character in these first two sketches before this, makes this turn of like, we're so happy for her character that she's being seen in this installment. Like she feels seen and loved, and there's finally somebody who's like passionate about her and asking her what she wants and what her name is. And another great line was when Beck says,
Babe, what's taking so long with those Totinos? You girls making out back there? You're crazy.
And then they immediately cut to them making out in the kitchen passionately. And it's just like, this is probably one of my all-time favorite sketches. And I think it's rightfully talked about in that way amongst a lot of other SNL fans. I saw write-ups about this. I've heard podcast episodes dedicated to this Totino's trilogy, and for good reason. It's just beautiful. They start speaking French, which was just like a wonderful touch. Like this is just perfect.
Yeah, and when we have a cast member like this who has never hosted, to me, I'm always thinking of what's the character she's going to bring back, and that this feels like something to where the trilogy is perfect, but if anybody can kind of continue to iterate on this, like this is something, if she were to ever host, which please SNL, like I know there's a writer's strike going on and an actor's strike going on, but please consider Vanessa Bayer to host. I would love to see them attempt to one-up this one, because they've basically one-upped it every time, and I have no doubt that they would be able to cook something up just as great.
Yeah, they could get the old band back together. Maybe I think it maybe was Sarah Schneider and Chris Kelly who worked with Vanessa on this. I'm pretty sure it was them. So maybe they could get the old band back together and if and when Vanessa hosts and do this, is one of the characters that I would definitely look forward to seeing again. And maybe she'll bring Cecily along to do the ex-porn stars sketches. And we had talked about the Saturday Night Network had the impression countdown. Last year they had the character countdown as voted on by the SNN listeners. And these ex-porn stars finished in the top 20 characters of all time. And this is something that a lot of people really remember Vanessa for, and her work with Cecily. And this is one of my favorites too. Vanessa playing the smart one, I guess, Sammy, Brecky. I guess she's
I don't know if I'd categorize either of them as the smart one. No offense to their characters, but yeah, these are really great as well. I mean, to me, if I had a personal favorite rendition of this sketch is the one with Jamie Foxx. I just felt his kind of, and I don't remember which was the first one. His might have been the first one. I'm not entirely sure, but the way that they were able to interact. But obviously, the key dynamic here is the dynamic with Cecily Strong's character. And I just think it's just such a funny concept to where you're taking kind of something we see on SNL a lot, the kind of infomercial sort of sketch, but instead of making, the product that they're selling something kind of insane, or that's where the humor is coming from, you're having the humor stem from the presenters. And, let's get even more specific and more niche, and let's make the presenters ex-porn stars. And that's not just a throwaway line. That is totally imbued into, their characters and everything they're saying while they're selling, whether it's, diamonds or whatever. And I think for me, these were always 10-to-1s, these sketches. And, this is when I think of what's a quintessential thing I'm looking for in a 10-to-1 sketch. It is this vibe. It's this kind of low rent sort of, I'm a little sleepy. It's almost time for bed. And it's also kind of genius placement too, because, infomercials typically are on, at 2 or 3 in the morning when, you are half asleep, and, maybe back in the day you'd fall asleep and you'd wake up and the TV's still on and there's this crazy infomercial on. But everything about the sketch, the dynamic between Vanessa and Cecily, they're just so lived in to these characters. And, this is an example to where I wouldn't even necessarily categorize this as a quintessential Vanessa sort of innocent character, but this is kind of being able to tap into that more just very vulgar, raunchy side that she clearly also has.
My brain doesn't function. It got banged off its axis. But I can still notice the sparkle of Sabasi crystals.
And she is able to kind of pepper that into some of her more childlike sketches, but this one is kind of you're turning the hose on at full volume, and it's just incredible.
Yeah, and the way she conveys comedy in different types of ways, her versatility, she doesn't just have one setting. She can subtly convey the comedy in many different ways. And in this way, it's a couple different things, I think. It's her eyes and facial expression. She has those dead eyes during these sketches. And it's just the right level for this character. Just the way she looks. And I don't remember her breaking in these sketches. And they did it 9 times, and I don't remember Vanessa breaking in these sketches, but it would have been so easy for her, and it would have lost its impact because the part of these characters is that they've been through these harrowing experiences. They may or may not have experimented with drugs that have caused them to be sedated a lot of times, probably, I'm sure, the way they're talking. But Vanessa has these dead eyes that are just perfect, and also the way Vanessa strings together nonsense.
I lost my foot in my butt. It used to be on my leg until I tried to kick a squirrel and missed really bad. Now when someone's sit on it, I'm you mean stand on it? And either way, they're get out of here.
It's just so beautiful, and we'll see that again toward the end of her tenure with a character that I'm sure both of us really want to talk about. But just Vanessa stringing together nonsense is just great. She's a wordsmith in that way. Both she and Cecily did it. So props to them for coming up with a quintessential 10-to-1. I agree with you, Sammy. This is the exact vibe that I want from a 10-to-1. I want something oddball and weird, and something that might make me a little uncomfortable too. That's what 10-to-1's for. They did it perfectly.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that, somebody like Will Forte wasn't on the cast when Vanessa was on. I don't think they overlapped at all. I think he had just left when she joined. But you can totally see somebody like Will Forte, who was in so many great 10 to 1s, kind of be somebody in this world, whether he's like a camera guy or a boom mic guy. But, that's just a little thought I had. But no, I think that these are just some great 10 to 1 characters.
Yeah, I'm sure our listeners will echo that sentiment. So we've talked about Miley Cyrus, classic. Jacob, the Marbinsa Boy, another classic. Totino's trilogy, which is just all-time great level stuff. And the ex-porn stars, very beloved. They finished again in the top 20 characters of all time as voted by Saturday Night Network listeners. So already we're seeing just some classic, wonderful material by Vanessa Bayer. Sammy, what's next up? Where do you want to go from here?
Well, I think we should talk about Don Lazarus next, because I think what's really impressive about Don Lazarus is how kind of instantly memorable and iconic this sketch was, or this character on Update was, and the fact that she debuted it during her last month as a cast member on the show. There are always these examples throughout SNL history, especially when you go back and you watch old episodes and you're like, oh my God, this iconic sketch is from, the end of their run. And this is an example of that, where you have this character, she's playing a weather girl who is just talking in complete gibberish, except you kind of understand what she's saying. Like, that is like, I think the thing I kind of take away from the sketch the most is that none of it makes sense.
Dawn, is it looking nice for Memorial Day weekend?
They better believe that. Well, it's time to pack up that sunscreen and protect those skins because, yeah, it's hot and hot. So if it's at that beach and park, stay dehydrated and water that mouth.
It's all gibberish. This is something that could easily fall flat, but I think her kind of charisma totally carries this. And she's able to kind of convey some sort of language to the audience that this is something that's funny, but you just have no idea what's going on. And yeah, it's just a total commitment to the bit. For Rick and Morty fans out there, this reminded me of like Interdimensional Cable, of like a very improv-y sort of vibe to it, but totally in control. And I think she brought this back to SNL 2 times afterwards. So I think it was on her last episode. And then I think sometime the next season she brought it back, which was just like, I don't know. I think that is something that is worth noting, because I think a lot of people talk about this as one of her great characters, but she only did it 3 times, and she did it during her last 3 episodes of the show, which I think is super impressive. Kind of reminds me of when A.D. Bryant left SNL, and she had just debuted the Trendsetters characters on Update with Bowen Yang, and she ended up doing that for her last episode. It is truly something to where you have to take note of, like, oh yeah, they were cooking until their very last episode. There was never, a time when Vanessa Bayer was just like coasting on SNL. She was always coming up with something great like this.
I had referenced when we were talking about the ex-porn stars that she was so good at at nonsense, at wordsmithing nonsense. And I think this is an example to a greater extent, maybe. And even if these lines are on cue cards, those are landmines that you could trip over. Like, if Vanessa screwed up or tripped over these lines, even if it's on cue cards, it could come off flat. So this is something where you have to be confident as a performer. You have to be confident in the material, and you just have to have that gift of gab that Vanessa evidently does. Just like amazing wordsmithing by Vanessa, just what you described, and it's completely true. It's just utter gibberish, but just so many funny moments, like her answer to Che, saying that she was good in her audition and now she's struggling, and then she gives this like gibberish answer, like pointing to the fact that she's nervous, essentially. In her second one, Che asked her why she's back so soon, and then there's like a wink reference to it being Vanessa's last show.
Dawn, you're back already? You were just here and it really didn't work out.
Hey, it's that last show and I gonna sneak that in.
Gosh, it's just so perfect. Like Vanessa playing nervous, but kind of in control, oddly, at the same time. It's just coming out not how she wants. It's just beautiful. And I agree with you. Like, it's just unfortunate in some ways that Dawn Lazarus debuted so late in Vanessa's time at SNL. I don't know if she came up with this just that late, like if it was just she happened to have a really good idea right before she left, or I don't know what the specifics are on that, but I'm glad we at least got to see it 2 more times after that debut, Sammy.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you on that. Like, and again, I think it just is just a testament to her as a performer that she was able to kind of bring this heat in so late into her career.
Yeah, right. And I want to highlight some more Vanessa Bear awkwardness, if we may. And we'll go back to season 39, which was her 4th season on SNL. And this was a sketch called Awkward Flirting with Kyle Mooney.
This might sound weird. Would you ever want to maybe, like, I don't know, get, more groceries for you? Because you should go maybe get some more in case you run out?
Yeah, of course. You know what they say, more food, more attitude.
Yeah, I think I read that on a bumper sticker or something.
Okay.
I should go.
Yeah, of course.
See you, Sarah.
Yeah.
This is just right up Vanessa's wheelhouse. And part of, to me, what makes her so charming is that awkwardness. Then we see toward the end of the sketch, her saying something vulgar and that plays so perfectly off of the awkwardness that we saw throughout this sketch. You remember this sketch, Sammy?
Oh, I definitely remember this sketch. And I think what's most impressive about this is that it's a sketch that's funny throughout. You have this kind of awkward dynamic between Kyle Mooney and Vanessa Bayer kind of playing a quintessential rom-com, protagonist. I think Kyle Mooney is more so playing, his kind of sort of Kyle Mooney awkward, nerdy guy character. But I think this whole sketch is kind of just a setup to that one punchline at the end. Everything is just a build-up to the fact that, oh yeah, like I'm gonna, have sex with this guy, and she's saying a different word, and it's bleeped out, and it's super funny, and it just makes me want to see this as like a 90-minute movie. Like the fact that if we were in a different era, if Vanessa was like a cast member in like the 80s or the 90s, like we would have totally seen a couple, Vanessa Bayer, led rom-coms. They wouldn't have been like as raunchy or whatever as this, but it's just kind of this is the sort of awkward character that she's able to play. And I think kind of pairing her up with Kyle Mooney here was, very, very genius. I think this was during Kyle's first season too, right?
Yeah, it was very early in his tenure. It had to be, I'm sure. I think it was in his first season. It was toward the end of his first season. It had to be something too. I think I've heard Vanessa talk about this on her podcast, and I think it came from just how she and Kyle, I think it was maybe a bit that they would do at the office, and it just sort of like, well, let's write this down, let's turn this into a sketch. This is good stuff. So, and yeah, just at the end, like you're right, it was leading to that whole punchline that was just really sweet and awkward. And at the end, Beck Bennett plays a character who lives in their building, who like asks her if she wants to go have sex, and she just says yes, like just add the blue. And then Vanessa still keeps her tone, like her tone doesn't change when she just casually says,
Okay, well, I'm just gonna go this guy, and then we'll go on our date. Yeah, very soon.
Like the tone doesn't change. Like it's just so perfect. And Kyle's okay with it too. Kyle's character is like, all right, awesome. And then he celebrates that he got a date with his neighbor that he's had a crush on. So this is just Vanessa to me. Like just her awkwardness shining, but then she displays herself with confidence at the end too. It's like she can switch gears, and it just makes so much sense. Like this is one of the maybe forgotten gems. I don't know in SNL circles how much people remember this one, but it seems forgotten to me, and it shouldn't be.
Yeah, I think like when people talk about maybe like Valentine's Day sketches or romantic sketches, at least from kind of the recent era, that's where I feel like this sketch kind of, is brought up. But, when you're talking about like classic pre-tapes, I think this is like a short film. It's not just a sketch in a way. Like it has like kind of a beginning, middle, and end. And I think on its own just works as such like a cohesive piece. So I do wish people talked about it more.
If you're listening, if you haven't seen this one in a while, it's season 39, episode 17, The Awkward Flirting. Go check it out. And Sammy, I know I have at least a couple of more examples of Vanessa's SNL genius on my mind, but I want to make sure to give you the floor to see what else you have.
Yeah, I mean, there's some very minor things. I don't know how much there is to really go into it, but something that I think is maybe a guilty pleasure for me. I don't know how much the SNL community or people who watched the show at the time liked this sketch, but J-Pop America Fun Time Now.
Oh, konnichiwa! Welcome to J-Pop America Fun Time Now, celebrating Japanese culture, fashion, and music. I am Jonathan Kavanaugh-san.
And I am Rebecca Stern-Markowitz-san. Before we begin, it may be shocking to your ears to hear that Jonathan-san and myself are not actually Japanese.
No one thinks you're Japanese.
Her character's name was Rebecca Stern-Markowitz. It's her and Taran Killam, who, as a pair, obviously they came into the show together. I always loved when they were kind of paired up in different sketches. And they're hosting a Japanese sort of anime themed talk show at their, college campus. And Jason Sudeikis is playing the advisor or whatever. So there's a fun dynamic there. And I'm also pretty sure that it's a throwaway line that this takes place at Michigan State, which I went to Michigan State. So there's an added layer there for me as to why I like it. But they're just totally committed to their love of Japanese culture. And in some senses, appropriating Japanese culture, but in somewhat of a loving way. It does make me think or kind of question, is this something that today would maybe not fly as well? I don't know, because I do think
it would.
Yeah, you think it would?
Because I think it would, because I think they're commenting on the appropriation piece.
Right.
So I think it works in that sense.
Yeah, no, and I agree, and I was kind of coming around to that, in my head there. But yeah, no, it is totally, coming from that place, as you were saying. But, I just loved the sort of dynamic, the relationship between, her and Taran Killam and these sketches. Always really worked for me. And then again, just kind of the authoritative figure that Jason Sudeikis played as their teacher, kind of, trying to wrangle them and their talk show was always super fun.
Yeah, and it's an example, because I know she and Taran are really good friends. Even to this day, they're very close. And the examples that we've given so far of her great work on SNL, it's with a lot of different people. So it seemed like Vanessa was a really good teammate. So she could play well with Cecily or Seth or Che and Jost or Taran, and it just works. She plays off of the hosts really well. And it seems like she's just an incredible teammate. And there's something that I love about that. You could throw her in a sketch with anybody and she'll make it work with that person. Seems like she'll find that dynamic that makes it great.
Yeah. And I think it's just bringing it back to the earlier part of our conversation about what makes her special as a cast member. She had the difficult task of kind of coming in between two very big dominating eras on the show, that mid-2000 cast of, Andy Samberg and Bill Hader and Kristen Wiig, and then the Kate McKinnon, Cecily Strong era. And, I think a lot of times on other shows, we've kind of talked about how there's a missing generation of SNL cast members kind of right there where, we could have seen Taran Killam really be the star, but he kind of never had that opportunity. And I think while Taran was on the show, Beck Bennett comes in and they kind of play, similar roles there too. So the fact that Vanessa was able to kind of navigate these two eras is another example of how she's able to navigate dynamics with many different cast members, finding a way to complement them. And I think that is what really makes for a great ensemble player. And, obviously SNL is an ensemble cast. So she's able to use that to her advantage to be a great utility player, but also find her niche with certain cast members.
It seemed to be a lack of ego, I think, in a lot of ways on Vanessa's part, for sure. And I have an example, and it's something that people might not, I think it's a beloved recurring sketch, but it might be still something that people might not totally associate Vanessa with, but I think it's an example of a lot of the stuff we've been talking about. She's not the star of this sketch, but she's a great teammate. She acts as sort of the voice of reason and glue and kind of ties the sketch together. And it's these high school theater showcase sketches. And these are great. And I want to specifically talk about the one with Emma Stone, when Emma Stone was the host, because there were so many good lines in there and some subtle things that Vanessa does about with her delivery. She's like such a great reactor to all the nonsense. And I know people, Sammy, like in our SNL verse, our SNL community, sometimes scoff at Mikey Day Explains or Keenan Reacts or those SNL tropes, but you kind of need that, or else the nonsense that's happening it needs to play off of something that's grounded, if that makes sense. That's why they do the Mikey Explains bits and all of that, because you need to juxtapose the nonsense with something more grounded. And Vanessa played the reactor and the person who was grounded so well, specifically in this Emma Stone sketch. Like, these high school theater showcases where these I guess well-intentioned but misguided high schoolers put on these showcases about Black Lives Matter and about like whatever social issues are going on at the time.
The program says tonight's proceeds go to Standing Rock. Let's get those Native Americans the pipeline they want.
Yeah, I don't think they know what's happening there.
And it's just super misguided. And Vanessa and Keenan are there to just kind of like react. And just Vanessa's intonation is just so great. Like, I don't know, like, I don't know if it's just me who really focused on a lot of what Vanessa was doing in these sketches, Sammy.
Well, I found it to be super interesting when you sent me the notes that this is something that you brought to the table here. And I'm glad you did, because it had me revisit this sketch. And I think another thing, I feel like some of the kind of high school, or maybe not high school, but sometimes some of the theater-y sketches people don't love. I personally really love these high school theater showcase sketches, because anything where you're kind of like poking fun at like kids or teenagers, to me, like kind of always, works. The line in this sketch where, they're kind of walking back and forth and saying, "Can I get a selfie? Can I get a selfie?" Like, that line is like super memorable to me. But yeah, I mean, I even wrote this down in my notes, how this is a setup that SNL uses, kind of, the back and forth between a stage show and the audience. And sometimes those don't work. But in this scenario, having Keenan and Vanessa kind of be able to anchor it and comment on what's going on definitely makes everything that's happening on stage a lot funnier. The line that I wrote down that she said, she kind of throws it off in like the most kind of casual ways. Like,
I paid $1,000 for that improv class.
It's just so nonchalant. Like, she could have easily kind of hammed it up a little more, but she really just kind of gives off that vibe of like, oh man, like, I'm the parent to these kids, and this is like what I'm spending all my money on. It's really funny, and I'm glad you kind of brought this one to the table, because there's a lot of examples of sketches where Vanessa doesn't really have the starring part. She can be a really good utility player. The sketch that kind of, not necessarily one-to-one, reminds me of this, but her kind of role in the Gemma sketches with Cecily Strong. Yeah. She's kind of off to the side, kind of commenting on things, being the butt of the joke on certain things. And I think she does a really good job at that. And it's another example of her trying to be a supporting cast member, supporting her cast, and kind of giving other people in the sketch, the win, and kind of anchoring it.
Exactly. Yeah. And going back to this, the high school theater showcase, there's this one line delivery that I wanted to highlight, because I think it illustrates a lot of what we've been talking about. So in one of the scenes within that sketch, the kids are speaking Chinese, or they think they are. They're probably speaking gibberish Chinese and Spanish a little bit in this. So they speak a different language. And then Emma Stone asks Vanessa Bayer's character,
"Excuse me, ma'am, could you understand that?"
No.
Is it because we were speaking Mandarin?
Yes.
And you only know English?
Yes.
Just the way that Vanessa Bayer says yes, like that delivery of that one word, to me conveys the tone of the sketch perfectly, and it undercuts the theater troupe in the best way. So she can say one word as an answer to some absurd questions, And to me, it's like kind of sets the foundation of why this sketch is funny in the first place. And yeah, it's just those little subtle things that I just watch a sketch performer and I appreciate. That's why I hold Vanessa in such high regard. In a lot of ways, it's those subtle things.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I'm glad you pointed that out as well. It's just kind of just a very simple thing, like a very simple delivery that kind of contributes to the overall stew of this sketch. And I think it can sometimes be looked at as like a thankless part, like, or, a part that, you're not getting all the laughs, but she kind of was able to take those and really, make lemons out of the lemonade or lemonade out of the lemons. I got my thoughts backwards, but if that makes sense.
Sound like Don Lazarus there. You're doing the best Don Lazarus there, Sammy. That's
yeah. I got too much Vanessa Bayer on the brain. I'm starting to turn into her characters.
And I'm gonna talk about one more, Sammy. It's a Christmas classic. To me, it's one of my all-time favorite Christmas sketches. It's the Santa Baby with Ryan Gosling, which is basically a Quentin Tarantino kind of vibes with this sketch. And Vanessa and Ryan Gosling play this couple, and they're meeting their new neighbors at a Christmas party. And Beck Bennett plays the dad who mentions to his son that Santa's coming. And Ryan Gosling and Vanessa Bayer get super excited because they want to meet Santa.
Yeah, well, anyway, Cindy and I drove up to Yosemite last month.
Oh gosh, that must have been gorgeous.
Wait, I'm sorry. Is Santa here? Yes or no?
And just like tension and awkwardness ensues, and they basically intimidate Beck into letting them meet Santa. And it's just so, it's like the vibes are just creepy and off. And I think Vanessa plays like subtly unhinged, like really well here.
Yeah, this is a classic. And, I think during the holiday season, this is one that I obviously need to revisit because I do think it is kind of a Christmas classic SNL sketch. This is another example of her kind of mixing the innocence of like, they really believe in Santa. But then you're kind of bringing in the raunchy flavor of like, do they want to like have a threesome with Santa? Like it's very unclear, what their objective is. But I think that ambiguity makes it even funnier. And I think this is something that I don't think we've really gotten the chance to talk about a ton that this sketch highlights is I wouldn't say that Vanessa Bayer is known to be like an amazing or well-known physical comedian, but the physical comedy and like the decisions and the choices she makes in this sketch are very underrated and add a ton. Her, like sucking on the candy cane, like seductively on the couch is like, it's so funny. And her like, jumping onto Santa's lap, Beck Bennett, ends up in the sketch dressed up as Santa. I think he's crying at one point as he's going down the stairs.
Yeah, I think he is crying.
Yeah, he's crying. Just like the whole situation gets amped up to 11 and she just, jumps on him. And it's just, it really kind of showcases that ability that she had that, again, just another tool in her kind of comedy back pocket that it's not something that we necessarily saw a ton, but you would see it kind of creep into a lot of her sketches to where she was fully lived in with a lot of the things that she was doing. And another thing to note in this sketch is just the dynamic that she has with Ryan Gosling is so funny.
We're gonna meet Santa, baby!
Woo! I love you. I love you so much, baby.
Well, happy holidays, everybody. I think I beat the traffic.
Whoa. Sit down. Why is everybody so tense? It's a party, right?
Woo!
Baby, give me some music.
Okay, baby.
I must follow you. Ever since you touched my hand, I know. Then
I'm scared.
I'm scared too.
Would love to know how this sketch kind of came about and everything like that. But it's just a true classic, and I'm glad that you brought this up.
This was you brought up such a good point about her physical acting, And it's like the way she's sitting on the couch, the way she and Ryan Gosling are dancing to that creepy 60s music when they're trying to like, hey, let's play some music, everybody lighten up. And just like her movements are so great. I think there's an example. She did a sketch with Paul Rudd in season 39. It was this couple that was getting divorced. And somebody, I think it was a Fleetwood Mac song that would come on, and they just couldn't help themselves, and they would dance and stuff. And the way Vanessa was dancing in this sketch was just perfect. So go look up the Paul Rudd hosted episode in season 39. And I think Peacock may have taken it down, but I mean, it exists. Just look it up. It exists. But so go look that up, and just that's another good example of Vanessa just putting her whole body into it and her mannerisms and just like really immersing herself into something. Sammy, that's a really good point about her physical acting. See, another, like, this is what a great sketch comedian does. They have different tools in their toolbox. They can convey comedy in so many different ways. That's what Vanessa does.
I think when you really put her work on the show under a microscope, there's just, you kind of peel back all these layers that I think because she was on the show during, this kind of lost generation, this lost era of SNL that I think we don't talk about enough. So I'm glad that, she is up for, the nomination to be, in the SNL Hall of Fame. And, that we're getting this opportunity to really talk about her and highlight some of her great moments. There's so many that we didn't get the chance to touch on, in her 7-year career on the show. One that comes to mind is her amazing Jennifer Aniston impression that she was able to do with Jennifer Aniston. Like, I don't know if you'd necessarily say, I mean, I guess we talked a lot about Miley Cyrus and her impression of her, that Vanessa Bayer is like a top level impressionist, but that one too is like one that is just so iconic.
And now, why do you think people are so nostalgic for the 90s?
Oh, yeah, the 90s are great. You go to work, you go on dates, and you go to cafes with your friends, and you all sit facing camera. Yeah. hey, Joey had a really, really bad audition, and we're all going to talk about it tonight at the boy apartment. You should come.
She got the vocal intonation down so well. I know Jennifer Aniston loved it. And I think probably part of it because it was really an impression of Rachel from Friends. And not necessarily of Jennifer Aniston. So maybe that was easier for Jennifer Aniston to take and be willing to make that cameo on Weekend Update with Vanessa. But that's just that's another great example. Like, there's so many things that sometimes as a Vanessa Bear super fan that I tend to forget that she did on the show. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. And so she left SNL in 2017. And after SNL, she's had roles in Trainwreck. She was in Barb and Star, Go to Vista Del Mar. She starred on a Showtime show called I Love That For You with Molly Shannon. 8 episodes. Sadly, it was canceled. That was honestly the only reason why I subscribed to Showtime. Like, this show
Me too.
This show made me subscribe to Showtime. And then once they announced that it wasn't coming back, I canceled my subscription.
Yep.
Yeah,
they'll show them. They'll show them.
Yeah, they're gonna, the two of us canceling our subscription, Sammy. It's gonna show them. But that's like that's our solidarity with Vanessa Bayer. But I love you. I love That For You was a wonderful show she did with Molly Shannon. She has a podcast with her brother Jonah called How Did We Get Weird? And I listen. I'm subscribed. I listen. I'm the target demo for this, Sammy. I'm 6 days older than Vanessa.
Oh,
We're
wow.
6 days
You really
apart.
are. You really are.
Yeah. So like everything they talk about is stuff that I experienced. And no offense to like the SNN Superfans or any other podcast, but I think my podcasting dream is to be on How Did We Get Weird with Vanessa and Jonah. So I'm going to put that into the ether. I always think of like stuff I could talk about. Anything that they bring up is just like was my experience too. So they have a wonderful podcast, How Did We Get Weird? It's Vanessa and Jonah Bear. So go check that out. As far as former SNL cast members, Sammy, who have never hosted the show, where does Vanessa rank on the list of like who you might want to see host?
Oh man, this is tough because I mean, I think for me, she's right up there with like Bobby Moynihan. I think those are the two for me that I really need to see host. And, sometimes I kind of worry, again, talking about this lost generation, that we're not going to get any hosts from that era. Like, I can see Kate McKinnon coming back to host. I can see Cecily Strong coming back to host. Pete Davidson almost hosted, but there's something about that Bobby Moynihan, that Taron Killam, that Vanessa Bayer era, that Nassim Pedrad, I would love to see all of those people host because I really, loved what they did on the show. But yeah, she's certainly up there. I mean, and I was really hoping for her Showtime show that would be the perfect opportunity for that to happen. But, maybe next season. I don't know.
Kind of think she'll do it at some point. I have a feeling. I think she and Bobby will come back to host at some point. Nassim and Taryn, maybe not so much. I agree with you. I'd love to see it, but I think Vanessa and Bobby, to me, there's paths to them coming back to host. But of course, we would love to see it. All right, Sammy. So now's the time. We're in an elevator right now, but we're going up like 80 floors, so you have some time to chat us up. So give us your elevator pitch for why Vanessa Bayer should be considered for the SNL Hall of Fame.
I think Vanessa Bayer, you kind of, take a look at her career on the show, and she was able to really do everything that you can really ask for somebody, on SNL. She did impressions. She had very memorable Weekend Update characters, recurring sketches, whether it was, the first sketch of the night or a 10-to-1, like the ex-porn star sketches. She had such a great dynamic with so many different cast members from multiple eras, and being able to come into the show in the midst of two big waves, the Kristen Wiig era, where, a lot of women on the show at that time were having trouble kind of breaking through, and she was able to kind of find her niche, breaking through because, Kristen Wiig was kind of, swallowing up a lot of that real estate on the show. But she was able to come in, make memorable characters and really represent her essence and kind of a through line throughout all of her characters, where you have somebody who feels like she just is, a child actor, in the high school play, but then sprinkles in just amazing, juxtaposed raunchy humor. And that is just something that she excelled at so much. She had so much great physical, humor, as we discussed, and a lot of different things that made her characters so lived in and so memorable. And, we barely scratched the surface on this episode. So I think, as somebody who I think is arguably underrated, I think she certainly deserves a spot in the SNL Hall of Fame.
Thank you so much, Thomas and Sammy. That was wonderful. I learned quite a bit. It's interesting to really think about what you said near the end in terms of, elbowing her way in when she started in the Kristen Wiig era and, blossoming into what she became. Really quite fascinating. Thank you so much for that, Sammy. Thank you so much for stopping by. And Thomas, as always, dynamite. Let's listen to a sketch now. This is Vanessa Bayer doing a Weekend Update bit. This is the first Don Lazarus appearance on Weekend Update, which debuted in Vanessa's third to last episode as a cast member. So it's kind of fitting that something that she did just on the way out the door is what we're using as her trademark sketch. I think it's pretty interesting to note that. Why don't we just give it a listen? Let's do that now.
Making her live television debut is our own Dawn Lazarus. Dawn! So what's the weather looking like?
And hello and thank it to you. Let's pop a look in at that weekend. Big sunny skies for you. Let's pop it all the way next weekend, yeah? That's a wow. Pressure's gonna push it, and it'll come down 10 times.
Yeah, what? I'm sorry, what was that?
Well, I'll tell ya, rain is on that way, but hey, can it hold it on for a few more days, can ya? You bet it. That sunny skies will push it away then clouds. Excuse me, that sunny skies will push it away then clouds, starting for Thursday.
Yeah, I don't get it, man. You were really good in your audition, but this is very different.
First time it's on that cameras, and it's a big nervous and gay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay, I see. So I think you were saying something about rain on the way. Is that okay, Dawn? Is that right? Is that true?
Hat.
Can you say more about the rain?
Hat. Pretend Manifestation's gonna have it, and if I'm you, cancel at that picnic and get it l'umbrella. Woo! At the map, we got it wet from here all the way into here. And that's that sky.
All right, well, we gave that a shot. Dawn Lazarus, everybody. Lawmakers in Oklahoma want to make it legal for gun owners to... Oh, I'm sorry, I think we're getting some breaking news.
Breaking news. God, boy, and it's a major, big A tropical and hurricane. We're talking yikes and wind.
Dawn, you're back? Why are you...
Let's have at that top 3D. Look at wind speed's got a whoosh, and it's in danger.
Is it even hurricane season right now?
Hat.
Did you make up a hurricane because you're nervous?
To betcha. And that's at your neck in the woods.
Weekend Update meteorologist Dawn Lazarus, everybody.
That's dynamite. You know, it reminds me of the Pedro Pascal sketch from this past season. Just when you play with language, you know, in such an advanced way, you can have a lot of fun. And Vanessa just owned this sketch. She had the cadence of, you know, a typical not network, but cable outlet weather person, you know, with that bouncing sort of delivery. But the language, just, you know, just another world. At any rate, that's what we have for you this week. It's been a pleasure, as always, joining you. On behalf of Thomas and Matt, from myself, we bid you adieu. But do us a favor, and on the way out, as you walk past the Weekend Update exhibit, turn out the lights, because the SNL Hall of Fame is now closed.
Thanks for listening to the SNL Hall of Fame podcast. Make sure to rate, review, share, and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on social media at SNL HOF. This is Doug DeNance saying, see you next week.
To podcasts and such.